Hi, it's Arik with Tribal.Games. This is part of our video tutorial series, and the topic is starting and stopping a tribal server. Even when you play a single-player campaign, you are still running a local tribal server. If you decide to host a server for your friends or the larger community, this video will show you how to expose this server on a private or public IP address or domain name, and allow other players to join your server instance. If you are just running a local server and have been trying to figure out how to stop the server from running, this video will also show you how to do that from the server console with the simple @quit command. This process works a bit differently on Mac than on PC, but I will show you toward the end of the video how to do the same thing on your Mac. One thing to note about running a tribal server is that the machine you run your server on must also support OpenGL. The first thing I want to cover in this tutorial is how to stop a tribal server. Remember, anytime a server is running, you will see the tribal server icon in your taskbar. Simply click on the server icon to access the server console. You may have noticed already, but you can't just click the X icon on the window to close the server. You may have been stopping it with Task Manager or by clicking the stop button in your Steam client, but the easiest way is just to click on the command line in the tribal server console and then type @quit and press enter. This immediately stops the tribal server instance. Let's first have a look at configuring a tribal server when not selecting single player mode, which automatically launches the server for you. We will want to change the IP address of our server to one that is exposed on either a private or public network. On the PC version, you can get to the executable files right from your Steam client. From the Steam library page, hover over the Tribal.Games entry and right-click. From here, we can go to Manage, then Browse Local Files. You can see it opens up a file dialog to the Tribal directory in your Steam installation folder. Here we can see the actual executables for both the Tribal client and the tribal server. The other file location you need to know about is where the server data is saved. Tribal server files are stored under the app data directory for the user you log in with on your PC. If we open a file explorer and navigate to our users folder, we can see the app data directory. If you don't see it at first, it is most likely because it is hidden by default. You need to open your File Explorer options and select Show Hidden Items or Files. The process is a little bit different depending on the version of Windows you're using, but you can probably easily search to find how. If we open the App Data folder and then open the Roaming folder, you should see a subfolder labeled Tribal.Games. After opening this subfolder, we can see the actual game files created by your server, assuming you have run a local server at least once. The file we are interested in is the Tribal Server Settings Configuration file. This is where the IP address and port number for your server are saved. We can open this file with any text editor of our choice. Here, we will just open it with Notepad. After opening the server configuration file, there isn't too much here. What we want to do is change the IP address of our server to one that is accessible from computers other than our own PC. If you are on a home network and just want to play with friends over Wi-Fi in your home, you can use the private IP address of your computer. All we need to do is change the IP address entry in our configuration file to the IP address of our computer on the home network. Be sure to include the quotation marks surrounding the IP address entry when making any changes. If you don't know your home network IP address, there are several ways to get it. Here, we just open a command prompt and type in the command ipconfig. This works both on the Windows command prompt and the macOS terminal prompt. In the list of information that you see will be an IP4 address that shows the home network address of your computer. This is the IP address we want to use in our server configuration file, so our server will listen for connections on the home network. we want to simply replace the entry localhost in our config file with the IP address from our home network. We could also change the port number if we wanted to as well, but here we will just leave it as the default. Be sure to leave the master entity index value the same. You never need to change this value unless you are deleting all of the data files and starting over, but even then you can leave this value unchanged. Just a quick note, if you did want to completely reset your server and all of the data, you can just delete all of the files in your app data roaming directory for tribal.games, including the config file, and everything will be back to the defaults when it was installed from Steam. Be aware though, this will delete all of the game files, including any saved data for other players that may have been playing on your server. Finally, let's save the changes to our config file and close out Notepad. Now let's go back to our Steam application folder for Tribal and double-click the Tribal server executable. The server automatically minimizes on your desktop when launched, and you can see it here on the taskbar. Let's click on the icon to open it on the desktop. This is our Tribal server console. As long as it's running on your computer, the game state is persisted. It doesn't matter if people are logged in and playing or not. With the server running, the world of Tribal continues to evolve. Only when you stop the server instance does time stop in Tribal. Let's maximize the window for a better look. We can see here that our server is running, and specifically, it is listening for connections on the IP address we configured. So now what's next? That's all we need for configuring the server. Now we can start up the Tribal client directly from Steam. You are probably already familiar with playing on a single-player instance. This is when you play alone on a server configured as localhost, which is done automatically when you launch a single-player instance. The multiplayer option automatically connects to our main Tribal community server hosted by tribal.games. What we want to do here though, along with any other players connecting to our server, is click on the custom option. This allows us to manually enter an IP address or hostname, along with the server port, which we left as the default. Now when we click connect, we will be connected to our same server, but over the private or public IP address that we configured. If we click play, we get logged into the Tribal client, and you can see the custom IP address of our server is listed here at the top. We can give that same IP address to anyone, and they can connect to our server as well. Just remember, if you're playing on a local Wi-Fi network, your friends have to be in range of your Wi-Fi. If you used a public IP address that is accessible outside of your local Wi-Fi network, then players from anywhere can connect to your server instance. This is known as a community server. Okay, so how do we do this on a Mac? It's completely identical, except I wanted to point out where the Tribal server config and saved data files are on a Mac. I'm just going to use a terminal window on Mac so it's a bit easier to see where the files are stored, at least for my Mac running Monterey 12. We will cd to our $home directory, then to the library folder, and under our library folder, we'll go to application support, and finally, the tribal.games folder. I'll list the files with ls, and you can see we have the same files here as we saw previously. Using any text editor to open the server settings file, you can see the format and values are the same as in the PC version. Just make the changes. You can use the same ipconfig command on the Mac terminal, and once they're saved, just start the server as usual. Well, that's it for this video. After release, the community forums will probably be a much better source of information about the various network ins and outs, but hopefully this gets you started. I'll catch you in the next video. Enjoy your adventures.